Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Let's just jump right in because today we are tackling a massive topic: how to actually navigate deep, overwhelming economic uncertainty. And, we're not doing this by looking at modern financial forecasts or Wall Street trends. Instead, we're looking at a super ancient, highly dramatic narrative, the story of a prophet named Elijah. It's a story that literally contains some of the most profound lessons on hidden provision you are ever going to encounter.
It's kind of the ultimate question, right? What do you do when the brook dries up? Think about it. When bills are piling up, when opportunities you were absolutely sure were locked in suddenly just vanish, and when our super predictable human systems completely fail us. We live in a world right now where millions are feeling this massive economic pressure. But hey, this isn't exactly a new phenomenon. So how do we find provision when everything around us feels like it's totally collapsing?
Section 1, the illusion of stability. To set the stage, a massive national crisis unfolded in ancient Israel under King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. Basically, their leadership led the entire nation into a deep spiritual rebellion, which eventually triggered a devastating judgment that literally shook the foundations of their whole society.
If you look at 1 Kings 17, the collapse happened almost like a domino effect. First, widespread spiritual rebellion and corruption really took hold under Ahab and Jezebel. The people completely abandoned their ultimate source and put all their trust in false, man-made systems. Because of this, God used Elijah to declare a pretty shocking judgment. There would be no dew or rain for years. None. And step 3? Well, that was the inevitable result: total agricultural and economic collapse. Society went from completely stable to completely ruined in the blink of an eye.
This brilliantly illustrates just the sheer panic of that kind of collapse. The cascading effects were instantaneous. When the rain stopped in an agricultural society, survival basically stopped. Crops completely failed, the food supply just vanished, livestock died of thirst, and the economy completely flatlined. And this wasn't just some isolated bad luck event. It affected absolutely everyone. It totally shattered the illusion of stability for both the wealthy elite and the poorest citizens alike. Now, this ancient famine actually holds up a perfect mirror to the anxieties we face today, right? While they dealt with failed crops and dead livestock, we're dealing with rising inflation, crazy unstable job markets, and crippling housing costs. People today falsely place their absolute trust in these fragile human systems, our jobs, the stock market, government safety nets. But as Elijah's story absolutely proves, human systems can shift and break literally overnight. Which brings us to section 2, hidden by the brook. Right in the middle of this huge, overwhelming national crisis, God's response to Elijah was incredibly surprising. It ran totally contrary to what any human logic would tell you to do. In 1 Kings 17:3, God gives this really shocking instruction. He says, "Leave here, turn eastward, and hide in the Cherith ravine." Notice that God didn't send his prophet to some fortified palace for safety or to a wealthy neighboring kingdom. Nope. He sent him into total isolation, to a hidden brook out in the wilderness with absolutely zero human backup plan. There is such a profound contrast going on here. Look, human systems rely on predictability, right? We love our jobs, markets, savings. We love things we can control. But divine provision, it frequently just removes that worldly security so we can learn total reliance during those hidden seasons. Now, it can feel a lot like isolation, but it's actually preparation. God often trains people in the hidden, quiet places long before bringing them into a public breakthrough. Moving on to section 3, unexpected sources of provision. Because once Elijah is actually out there in the wilderness, the way he's kept alive is nothing short of miraculous. It is highly unusual and completely illogical. Let's think about the cultural context of these ravens for a second. In Jewish culture, ravens were considered completely unclean birds. So there is this deep, profound irony happening. God is using an unclean bird to feed his holy prophet. It absolutely proves, without a doubt, that divine provision completely ignores human logic. God just doesn't need to use the proper or, expected channels to sustain you. Every single morning and every single evening, these ravens miraculously brought bread and meat right to Elijah. It's this rhythmic, totally consistent miracle. And it really emphasizes that God controls resources far, far beyond what we can physically see or predict through our traditional, spreadsheet-based human systems.
So if fear is telling you there's no way forward right now, remember that modern provision is equally unexpected. It could be an opportunity that just comes completely out of nowhere, right? Or the kindness of a total stranger, a sudden brilliant idea, a new skill you have to develop out of sheer necessity, or a door that literally nobody predicted would ever open. The ravens of today take a lot of different forms, but they all remind us that provision often comes from the most unexpected avenue. All right, section 4, when the brook dries. This is the critical plot twist in Elijah's survival story, and it's definitely where the tension really starts to build. Just imagine the agonizing anxiety of this experience. The very place God led Elijah to for safety is now failing him. Day after day, the water in the brook just slowly disappears. It is incredibly easy to trust when the brook is actively flowing, when those direct deposits are just hitting your bank account right on schedule. But watching your resources shrink, wow, that is the ultimate test of faith. And this reveals a super important core truth. The brook was never Elijah's source. God was. We have this terrible habit of worshiping the temporary provision, like our current job, a specific client, or just our current situation, instead of relying on the eternal provider. So when the provision fades, we panic, simply because we forgot who was actually sending it in the first place. So here's the crucial takeaway. A drying brook is absolutely not a sign of abandonment. It is a signal of transition. When jobs disappear, when industries completely change, or when markets crash, it's often a divine push. God hasn't failed you. He's just closing one avenue to transition you right into the next season. Which leads perfectly into section 5, overcoming modern economic fear. Bringing this lesson fully into the present day is exactly how we can address this rampant economic anxiety that's spreading globally right now. When we're faced with uncertainty, fear and faith produce totally different reactions. Fear destroys our peace, it destroys our wisdom, and it paralyzes us into making really terrible panic decisions. But true faith? True faith isn't laziness. Faith definitely doesn't mean just sitting on the couch doing nothing. Faith means trusting God, remaining highly obedient, and actively moving when you're spoken to. It's about active, wise obedience. Notice how the provision actually changed locations for Elijah. It moved from the Brook Cherith to the ravens, and finally God instructed him to move to a widow at Zarephath. The provision is seasonal, and because it's seasonal, it frequently requires us to pack up and move when God's voice moves. Old systems absolutely may fail. They do it all the time, but new opportunities will appear when we truly listen. If you're entering a new season right now, you need to stay highly sensitive to the new careers, the new ideas, or the new directions you're being led toward. Please don't stay stuck mourning the dry brook when the provision has already moved down the road. Remember this ancient name, Jehovah Jireh. It literally translates to the Lord who provides. The exact same God who fed a prophet with unclean birds during a total national collapse. Yeah, he knows exactly how to care for you today. His faithfulness is eternal, even when your current circumstances are entirely seasonal. It's absolutely crucial to remember what is not your ultimate source. Your job, not your ultimate source. Your bank account, the global economy, all these fragile human systems, they are not your ultimate source. Actually, the greatest, most profound miracles often happen at the exact moment when all human security completely disappears. So I really want to leave you with this provocative thought as we wrap up. If your brook feels incredibly dry right now, are you trusting the provision or are you trusting the provider? Think about where your true security lies when human systems eventually fail. Thank you so much for joining this explainer, and we'll catch you next time.